So when I lived in Connecticut, after I moved from Brooklyn, my wife and I moved up to Connecticut, Paul Dixon was the fishing department manager at Orvis in Manhattan. This is 100 years ago. To the point charters wasn't even thought about at that point. That's how, this is back in the early 90s. And so long story short, Paul and I, there was a place where I lived in Connecticut in Stamford, and in between Stamford and Darien, the town of Darien, was a pond that connected the two towns. It's called Holly Pond. Paul, being the fishing manager, used to guide on foot. He didn't have a captain's license, so he would wade guide people up to my spot. And I'd see Paul there. I go, Paul, you're killing me. You ruined this. And I would see Paul and go, you know, you ruined. I'll see him 30 years later and say, you know, you ruined Holly Pond. No, it wasn't me, man. I wasn't. It's so funny.
And so, how old were you? Like, how did you find out about fly fishing, and like, how did that start? Because you probably didn't just grab a fly rod one day and like, I'm gonna wing this.
Well, my dad fly fished.
Okay.
For bass. When I was growing up throwing, lures, Dad would throw a fly rod. Up in upstate, we had a small summer cabin in New York State, up in White Lake, New York, not far from the Delaware. And my dad loved the lakes up there, and we bass fished. And I'd be sitting there with a hula popper, and Dad would be there throwing a bug, and then eventually I gravitated towards the fly, and then we started fishing Roscoe, New York, which is what they call the birthplace of North American fly fishing, the beaver kill.
Yeah.
And so we used to fish that a bunch. And then eventually, but I was always as I got older and I could do my own thing, I saltwater fished, I was a big saltwater angler. And so I grew up in Brooklyn in a 16-story tenement, small, my mom, my dad, and me. And we had 1,000 square foot, 900 square foot apartment on the 14th floor. And you could see the bay from the window. And I used to take my fishing pole, take the elevator down, walk out to the back where there was a big garbage dump there, a sanitation department for New York City. I'd go back in there, and man, that's where I started learning how to striper fish. But it wasn't with the fly.
And then how'd you end up here? Where are we? And what's so significant about this lake?
I was working in the garment center. That's what I did for a living. I sold baby clothes, believe it or not. Little girls' party dresses. You can believe it.
Yeah.
And my company, I ran sales for them in Manhattan. And they asked me to move out of New York and not manage the sales. And I said, okay, where do you want me to live? And they said, we don't care. Move wherever you want. Just don't be in New York with the sales team. You're too big an influence on them. We're paying these guys a lot of money. If they can't do it without you, we should be finding different people. Yeah. I said, okay. So I looked up and down. I'm a saltwater guy. So, naturally, I looked at Charleston. I looked at Jacksonville. I looked at Tampa. I looked at Miami. I looked at Savannah, everywhere up and down the East Coast where I could be on the water. And my accounts that I had to fly to was Walmart, Bentonville, Arkansas, Target stores, Minneapolis, Kmart, Detroit, and then San Francisco. So and JCPenney's in Dallas. None of these airports on the coast flew direct. The only airport that in the South that flew direct was from Atlanta. So my wife's from Atlanta. She spent 10 years here before. She didn't grow up here, but she spent 10 years living here and loved it. And so what ended up happening was I called up, I had read about somewhere about these freshwater striped bass. Now remember, I'm in Connecticut. I'm a saltwater striper fanatic. And I read about these stripers in freshwater down south. And they said Lake Lanier has stripers. So I called up Department of Natural Resources and asked them, tell me about the striper fishing. They go, oh, we stock them every year. They can't spawn on their own, but we put in 400,000 or 500,000 fingerlings every year. We put them in 1 inch, They grow to 20, 30 pounds, and it's really interesting for a freshwater fishery. And so, long story short, I ended up calling up a guide down here. And I said to him, I said, listen, can you catch these on a popper? Because he was a bait guide, a lot
Yeah.
of, which is 99% of the guides down here fish live bait. So I said, can you catch them on a popper? He goes, oh yeah, we get topwater. I said, can you catch them on a bomber long A, 5 feet under the surface? He goes, oh yeah, that's one of our big bites. I said, what about a bucktail jig? And he says, bucktails are probably our number one lure. The light bulb went off. I said, I don't know this lake, but I can do everything they're doing with depending on the lines I'm using. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I told my wife we're moving to Atlanta, and she was delighted. And I came down here, and the first 6 months I didn't catch a fish. I mean, I got shut out for 6 months.
Did you bring a boat with you?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I brought a action craft, a
Saltwater
1890.
guys.
Yeah, I was a saltwater guy.
Yeah, I bet. Had they seen boats like that before?
A couple, but not many.
It was kind of like, who's this guy? It's like when the bass guys come down to the Keys, they're like, what is that thing?
Yeah,
they got carpet and glitter and trolling motors and 14 screens.
If I had a dollar for every guy that would come up to me and go, "There's no trout in the lake anymore. What are you doing here?" Because they see fly fishing, they think river runs through it, 1992, and that's what they. And I said, okay. And then over the years, I figured out the fishery, and then the guys at the Hawk, Gary Merriman, who owned the Fish Hawk, he doesn't own it anymore, but he did. Gary Merriman said to me, I need you to take some of my customers to Lanier. I have some great customers. They don't know about this. I want to expose them to stripers on Lake Lanier. Would you take them? And I said, Gary, I'm not guiding. I'm not a guy. I have a full-time job. I fish a lot.
Yeah.
And he kept pestering me for a year. Finally, I agreed. I said, I'll take out 6 customers. So he gave me 6 trips, and I liked it. The next year, he gave me 10. Then it got to 20. And then all of a sudden, I'm booking 60 trips a year, and I got a full-time job.
You're like, wait a second.
This is getting, it was hard, but nobody was doing it. I was the only guy down here doing it, and now here, fast forward to today, and freshwater stripers, or what I call sodium-free stripers, because they're not in salt water.
Yeah.
Is becoming really popular. And the book came about because Lefty called me up and said, Henry, I am getting so many emails and letters regarding stripers in freshwater, hybrids. There's no literature on it. The industry needs a book, and you need to write it. And I really, I knew I could, but I just didn't want to.
Well, you're already working 2 full-time jobs.
Now you're going to have me writing a book. But, Lefty is like Don Corleone. You don't say no to the Godfather.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, Lefty, I'll do it. So he hooked me up with Skyhorse Publishing in New York City, which was Lions Group. And I wrote the book. But if you look today, striper fishing in freshwater is like a powder keg. It has exploded. And there is no lake in the United States, even though we have stripers in like 38 states and hybrids in 38 out of the 50 states in the United States, there's not even a lake that's close to how many fly fishermen fish Lake Lanier. I had a friend and I a few years ago count how many fly anglers we see, not on one day, but just overall.
Just, in general.
Through the year, how many different anglers or boats, because we know a lot of the people, and everybody's really friendly down here.
Yeah.
We have over 100 boats that fly fish this lake. I would think if you tried to find another freshwater lake or river system in the country that fly fished, you couldn't find 25 boats, and we've got over 100. It's unbelievable.
Just the size of this lake is, we've
got an apex predator that pulls like a saltwater fish in a freshwater environment, and you get a saltwater experience in a freshwater environment. And so all the trout guys, you know, on their bucket list, I want to catch one striper. I want to catch a 10-pound striper. And our fish average between 8 and 12.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you get 4s and 6s, but you also get 15s and 20s as far as size, you know, so it's a neat fishery.
It's incredible. I mean, and so what's really cool about this is I'm traveling, so I'm seeing all these bodies of waters I've never seen before. I don't know if you've ever been to Tybee. That was, you know, one of the last spots, and I talked about it with some of the guys over at Fishhawk. You know, I mean, their conditions are so different than ours. You know, they have an 8-foot tide.
That's right.
To be not to be ignorant, but I didn't know those existed.
Yeah.
You know, at least this close by.
In New York, we had 6-foot tides.
Yeah, I'm down there in Islamorada with 1 to 2. You know, depending on the moon
Right.
or you know the time of year, and it's like okay, yeah, and that will still get you skinny, you know, or stuck. But that 8-foot tide, we're walking down the shrimp docks, and I'm once looking up at the restaurant, and now I'm parallel with it, and it's so incredible.
You know, what's nice about having bigger tides, there is an advantage at times to it. The big advantage is if you can't afford a boat and you're a beach fisherman,
yeah,
you go out on a moon and you know, on a full moon to the beach when it's low tide, and you see all the sandbars and the troughs and where everything is, because the fish come in and the fish feed from the ocean. They come into the beach like it's like they get off the highway to feed and then they get back on the highway and travel. And so you can learn that with big tides much easier, you know, so that's the advantage of having a big tide, you know.
Yeah, no, that makes it really nice, and I guess what they were explaining to me is, you know, it also helps consolidate the fish.
100%.
So you're able to, you know, it's just like fishing a finger channel. You know, when it's low tide, everything's, you know, now you suddenly have 80% less, you know,
Yep.
water surface area for them to be in. They're
But-
right there.
But we can't sight fish to snook on the beach up here.
No,
That's the difference. We don't have a snook run on Lake
Yeah.
Lanier.
that's true.
Yeah, that's the big difference.
Yeah. So I mean, what is striper bass, correct?
Yep,
That's
striped bass.
So that's the number one targeted species out here. Like, what are people really?
That's the number 2 target of species. For fly anglers, it's the number 1. For conventional anglers, this is an Alabama what they call spotted bass lake. It looks like a largemouth, but if you look at where the jaw is, it's small, like a smallmouth. So it's sort of a in between. It's its own species of bass. They call them spotted bass.
Yeah.
There's Kentucky spots, there's Alabama spots, there's spots that come from the Coosa River Basin here. But our spotted bass fishery, so Lanier right now holds 3 IGFA line class records for Alabama spotted bass on this lake. It's one of the best spotted bass lakes in the country.
And how deep is this lake?
We can get down to about 130, 135 feet. Yeah.
And what's the visibility like?
You know, in the winter, you can see 6, 8 feet down. This time of year, with all the boat traffic and whatnot, you know, it's a lot less. But, you know, it's not a... So when we think of lakes, there are basically 4 types of lakes that you're going to run across in very simplistic terms. Shallow lakes, deep lakes, clear lakes, and stained lakes. The easiest fishing is if you're in a shallow stained lake. That's where you get the easiest fishing. The hardest fishing is in a clear, deep lake. Lanier is a mountain lake. It's a deep, clear lake. But we have fantastic fishing for spotted bass and for striped bass. And then we have your usual, you know, we have your alligator gar, and we actually have walleyes in here.
Really?
As well, which is hard to believe. But we do. We have walleye. You know, we have catfish, different species of catfish. We have different kinds of brim, you know, sunnies. We have, what am I missing? We have carp. And then we have yellow perch. We have crappie. So we have a good variety of fish. But the 2 stars on the lake, and we have largemouth.
Yeah.
But the spots have overtaken the largemouth. I had a female angler on the boat with me a few years ago that had I thought to go to the shore and weigh the largemouth that she caught on a poppin' bug, it would have been a IGFA world record. She had a largemouth that was over 8 pounds, and she was fishing 16-pound tippet with a Gartside gurgler, and it would have been a world record. I didn't think about it at the
No,
time.
you're just fishing. You're having a good time.
Yeah, I was on a guide trip.
Yeah, you're like, all right, that's amazing. Great job.
Right.
Next.
That's exactly right.
That's what happens with a lot of the guys that, really truly fish.
Oh, yeah.
They don't.
But there is actually, if you were a record hunter and you were a guy,
Yeah.
For girls, there's plenty of records available. But if you're a guy and you want a world record, the 4-pound tippet for spotted bass is basically a 3.5-pound fish right now. So if you caught a 4-pound Alabama spot, you'd have a world record. And there's a ton of those fish here on the lake. So you could definitely hunt world records if that's your thing. We pull for carp down between here and the Fish Hawk in Atlanta. In Roswell, Georgia, we have great carp flats. And, I used to guide for that. I just sold the boat about a year ago. So I'm not polling anymore, but yeah. I love carp.
What kind of boat were you guiding?
I was in a towee.
Towee.
A little 16-foot towee.
Is that a popular up here boat? Or?
Yeah, they're made in McMinnville, Tennessee. And they just added a second version of it, but it's basically a technical poling skiff. It's bigger than a canoe, but smaller than a flats boat as far as width, and weighs 285 pounds. You can pole it with one hand. I can get that boat in puddles, literally in puddles.
That's nice when you're chasing something across the flat and it's on the other side of that little bank.
No question.
How many times have you gotten it stuck?
A few, but
that's a given.
You pull out of it. You pop a can of spinach like Popeye, and you get out of there.
Start pushing. And what's your guys' bottom here? Like, is it mud based?
All red clay.
Red clay. So does it pack?
Yeah.
So you can step on it and not sink down.
No, you can sink some. Some of it is definitely
a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little soft, but it's not like if you're carp fishing down the river, you want to wade mostly in areas where there's grass growing because there's a hard surface.
Yeah.
But if there's no grass, there's a chance you're going to sink up to your ankles.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Not terrible. It's
but
not
still inconvenient.
Yeah, it's not like the Keys where you can walk in a place and sink up to your knees.
Yeah, and then other places you can't dig to save your life.
Right.
Under my dock, it's hard bottom. My buddy's house, 9 over. You can go about to your waist if you want to. And I'm like, but he's in a cove, and all that sediment over the years just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and holding. And where in front of my house, you can't even put a stake up pole in the ground, and anchoring's like kind of out of the question as well, because unless it's if it's actually any windy, because it's just straight hard bottom. So would you say most of the fly fishing guys here, fishing guys, are guys that live in the area, or do you think a lot are traveling from out of town to here?
I think it's mostly people probably within 100 miles that fish this lake, and especially within 50 miles that come and fish this lake. But we do have people coming from a lot of other states. We have actually a fly fishing tournament, believe it or not, on this lake called the Southern Striper Open, which is a non-money making tournament. All the proceeds go to benefit Project Healing Waters. And so we take out a whole bunch of vets the day before the tournament. We let them fly fish the lake. And then after that, we have basically a 1.5-day tournament, and we give out all sorts of prizes, mostly sponsored by a lot of the manufacturers that will donate equipment for the winners. So it's a non-money tournament, and we can usually raise somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 for Project Healing Waters. It's always at the end of March, which is a good time of year on Lanier for stripers. And when you take the vets out before the tournament, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You feel so proud.
I bet. And I bet they love it.
Oh, they love it. It's just so much fun. And every year our captain's list for those volunteer boats gets bigger and bigger and
Yeah, of
bigger.
course. Who wouldn't want to help?
Exactly.
You know.
And
And-
we had guys we had some vets up from South Carolina, as well as many in Georgia, but from a lot of the local states in the Southeast that come up to fish the tournament.
And one thing about us, you know, I know you've heard about the movie. You know, it's for the industry. It's one of the first movies in almost 30 years to come out. You know, to actually to the big screens about fly fishing. You know, but one of the big goals for us, and you know, with the author and the production team, was to make a movie that you could bring your wife and family to, that they would enjoy as well. Because I'm sure for the most part, everyone's tired of hearing, you know, their significant other talk about fly fishing every single day. So what's really cool, and you know, I'll show you the trailer a little later, is that it's also a family movie with a good story,
Yep.
and the basis is, you know, real life, actually good footage of fly fishing.
You know,
Yeah.
I have a lot of female clients, and I have a lot of customers that bring their spouse, their girlfriend, their son or their daughter.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a guide, to me, that's the most fun, is when I get family on
Yeah.
the boat. You're making memories for them that last a lifetime.
Everyone
And
remembers their first trip.
you can't beat it. You
Yeah.
just can't beat it. I'll never forget. I had two sons and a father on the boat. The father was 91. The sons were 72. 72 and 69. And, you know, at the time I was probably 50, 55 years old. And then the guy says, yeah, I'm bringing my father with me. And the guy walks on the boat. He could have been my grandfather at the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's great. It's just, that's what I love about guiding.
and and just meeting people from all over, you know,
Oh, yeah.
especially as this fishery, you know, expands and people are knowing about it more and more. I mean, like you said, back when you were fishing here, when you first started, it probably wasn't much a thought about, you know, activity to do. And I mean, how quick have you seen it evolve, you know,
The
since you've
fly
been?
fishing has evolved over the last, 25 years exponentially. Maybe the first 5, 10 years, maybe we had 10 anglers, 15 anglers that fly fished. But in the last 12, 15 years, all of a sudden, one year you had 50 anglers that would do it, the next year 65, the next year 80. It's really exploded. And I think the reason is not only the love of fly fishing, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
It's so relaxing. But the fact that you're on a lake and you're catching a saltwater fish in a freshwater environment, Atlanta is easily one of the biggest destination towns in the United States for saltwater anglers. They have the largest saltwater fishing club that's conventional. But if you were to talk to the guys, say at the Fish Hawk or Alpharetta Outfitters or any of the shops locally up here, there are so many guys that own flats boats that take their boats. I mean, we can get to the Panhandle in under 6 hours and be tarpon fishing, at Alligator Point in 5.5 hours. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I just had no idea, you know, and you know, probably by my own doing, like I just never looked into Atlanta. Like, you know, just I'm down there in the Keys. When I travel, we generally go to the Bahamas. You know, we go other places. You know, and as I got closer to Atlanta, I started talking to some of the guys at Fishhawk, and they just started explaining to me like how big this community is here. You know, it's not hundreds, it's thousands. And I mean, while we were just at that fly shop a Saturday morning, I mean, it was people after people. We're going to Alaska. We're going to Montana. We're going to the Bahamas next week. I mean, just place after place after place in there. People are from Atlanta. They have a fly trip planned, and it was just Alaska. And I mean, just nonstop people.
You know how many years they've been in business?
No.
74
Really?
is when Gary Merriman started. So it's over 50 years old. And it was one of the biggest, if not, I don't know if it is today, but it was for many, many years, the biggest fly shop east of the Mississippi. And Atlanta is such a fly-in hub for so many people because our airport is so big. People are flying in on business all the time. They want to go fishing. They can trout fish. They can bass fish. And over the last 25 years, they can come up here and striper fish on a 40-minute car ride and have a saltwater experience with birds diving and fish busting. And
those videos, which we're going to put in, it's hard to fathom that because for so long I've thought bass fishing You're up
Exactly.
against a bank, you're throwing a worm. You know, some guys throw flies, um, and and you're just wiggling a worm or you're throwing a top water, and that is what it is. And then I take a look at your freshwater fishing, and it's like you're 30 miles offshore and you found the mahi, and the birds are busting on it, the bait's blowing
Exactly.
up, and absolutely incredible.
And you know, that was also the purpose for writing the book. Lefty felt, Lefty Cray, who's no longer with us, felt that as far as the striper fishery goes, it was, in his words, a powder keg ready to explode. And he just said, look, we need something in the industry to talk about hybrids and striped bass. And I get letters and emails all the time from people wanting to know, how do you do this? Where do you start?
Yeah.
He goes, I want you to write the book, and I want it to be a how-to. He said, Henry, I want someone to read this book, and within 1 year, they're going to know exactly what they need to do when they go to a place that they've never fished before. So, Nate, I've spilled my heart into this book. I'm still in arrears with the publishing company for $850. There's no money in writing a book,
Yeah.
okay? But I'm a pay it forward guy. I was taught to be a pay it forward guy
Yeah.
from guys like Lefty and Whitlock and Popovic's, and those guys always thought, pay it forward to the next group of young guys coming in, and that's who taught me, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Imagine if you would have had a book you could have picked up, and that first 6 months you probably could have turned it into a month and a half, and it would have made your your
It's so
exploration.
interesting. It's so interesting because being a striper guy from the Northeast, they're structure-driven fish. You fish rock piles, you fish jetties, you fish lighthouses, you fish pilings, you fish sandbars, you fish rips. Those are the places you find the stripers. And here in Georgia, I would go into a cove, and on the left side of the cove was pilings and rocks and blow down trees and everything you'd think a striper would use. The other side of the cove going in was just red clay, flat red clay. And I went into just about every stinking cove, fishing that structure for 6 months. And then one day I saw the fish blowing up on the red clay, and a light bulb went off.
You're like, wait
I'm
a
fishing the wrong side. This is a different lake. This is a same looking species, but where's the bait? No tides, but where's the bait? You got to follow the bait, and the bait loves the red clay. It took me 6 months to figure that out. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I did figure it out.
I'm like big trial and error. There's been a million spots that I've tried to fish. I've had one good day, and then I fish it 10,000 times and can't figure it out again. And so, it's fishing. It's trial and error.
That's what it is.
And if we can go out and catch a fish every day, nice and easy, I don't think we'd be driven as much and challenge ourselves to explore a new spot. Because if we could say we could fish that point over there and we knew we'd catch, 10, 15, in hindsight, of course, we'd like to think we'd probably fish it. But in reality, we want the chase, the adventure, figuring out where no one else can figure out.
You and I are strung together from the same gene pool of you like a challenge.
I love a challenge.
And this lake is absolutely a challenge. I will say it's gotten a lot easier for the guys once they've read the book or they've come out enough to see what's going on. You do figure it out fairly quickly, but there's just little nuances that you would never think make a difference. Like the retrieve to catch a striped bass on Lake Lanier there's a retrieve that works 95% of the time, and that is you've got to pause the fly in between your strips. You could strip 3 short times, strip, and then wait 3 to 5 seconds. They will eat it on the pause at least 9 out of 10 times. Who would know? Who would have thunk that?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like that book, I'm going to have to check it out, it's the key to success.
It shortens the learning curve.
Which is big.
And I always tell people, and they're like, I want to come and learn. Could you take me out on the lake and teach me your striper fishing so I could learn it to fly fish myself? And I'm like, I'd be happy to, but why don't you buy You know, for 17 bucks,
Yeah.
instead of spending 500, spend $17, read the book, and I promise, if you still want to go out, I'll do it. But you know, it's not about me taking trips. It's about what can I do to pass on, you know, the success rate to other people.
Let's skip that first trip where you're very confused and frustrated. Read the book. Let's go out and have the best first trip of your life.
That's right.
You know, it's like,
yeah.
It's like stretching before running. You know, it might help a little bit.
It's true. Listen, surprisingly, I've sold way more than I thought I was going to. Actually, I was really surprised. So it's been good. They've asked if I felt like writing another one, and I said, not a chance.
Yeah.
I threw my heart and soul into this one. I'm a one and done guy.
Yeah,
I'm like a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
You know,
you're like, I got my book.
Yeah.
I just want to finish.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.